In the small, forgotten village of Umuala, hidden between deep forest and dusty red earth, lived a man named Okonkwo. He was a solitary figure, tall, with sun-darkened skin like roasted yam peels, and eyes that burned with secrets. Okonkwo rarely smiled, and the villagers whispered about his past. Some said he once had a wife who disappeared without a trace. Others believed he was cursed, touched by the spirits of the dark forest. He lived on the edge of the village in a crumbling mud house, surrounded by a dying farm and silence. Children were warned never to go near his compound. Yet, every market day, Okonkwo brought the most delicious-smelling meat stew in clay pots, selling out before noon. It was spicy, rich, and unforgettable. No one dared ask what kind of meat it was. Meat was meat in a place where hunger beat deeper than truth. One day, the village square buzzed with shock. Okonkwo's only daughter, Edeora, just 14 years old, had vanished. No one saw her leave. No one heard a scream. But the next morning, Okonkwo was back at his usual spot in the market, smiling for the first time in years, ladling his famous stew with a strange gleam in his eye. Before Edeora disappeared, she was the only light in Okonkwo's bleak world. A bright-eyed girl with braids always covered in red beads, she often danced alone near the stream, humming tunes her mother once sang. Despite Okonkwo's coldness, Edeora loved him. She spoke little, but when she smiled, even the goats paused to look. People pitied her, a flower blooming in darkness. No one understood why she stayed by his side, cooking his meals and caring for his wounds. They called her the lamb in a lion's den. The day before she vanished, Edeora was seen carrying a calabash into the forest, something she never did before. Old Mama Ngozi swore she saw the girl's eyes filled with tears as she crossed the footpath, barefoot and trembling. Something was wrong, she told the others, but fear closed our mouths. That night, dogs howled long into the dark, and the moon refused to rise. By morning, her mouth was empty, her clothes still folded, and her father's silence louder than thunder. Rumors ran wild. Some said Edeora had been taken by forest spirits. Others whispered that she'd run away to escape her father's harshness. But no one dared confront Okonkwo. He remained seated in front of his hut every day, staring blankly at the horizon, not uttering a single word. He did not join the search party. He did not hang the missing child's cloth on the shrine like tradition demanded. When the village elders questioned him, he only replied, "The forest knows." That chilled even the boldest men. Over time, the search slowed, and then stopped. Edeora became another name on the list of the lost. But something changed in Okonkwo. He began to speak more in the market square. He gave meat to beggars. He even laughed once, loud, rough, and strange. The villagers watched him with suspicion, especially when he started feeding the entire village every week with rich, sweet-smelling stew. Where does he get all that meat from? Some asked. His goats are still alive, others noticed. But when questions grew louder, Okonkwo only smiled and said, "The gods have provided." The stew was unlike anything the villagers had tasted before, rich, tender, and full of a strange sweetness that lingered on the tongue. Even the chief licked his fingers after eating it. Each Saturday, Okonkwo would call the people to his compound and serve them from a large black pot that never seemed to run dry. No one could identify the type of meat. "Bush meat," he would say with a chuckle. But there were no fresh hunting tales, no new animal skins drying outside his home. Some claimed they saw bones that looked like they belonged to something too human. A woman once said she found a tiny bracelet in her portion, but when she screamed, Okonkwo's eyes burned into hers with a silence that dared her to speak again. She said nothing more. Rumors began to stir, as they always do in villages. Children whispered stories at night, of voices crying from beneath the earth, of a girl's laughter echoing from Okonkwo's shattered hut. But no one dared question him. Okonkwo was once a quiet man, but since his daughter's disappearance, something had changed. He walked taller now, his eyes sharper, his voice heavier. The village elders noticed, but chose silence. After all, who would risk angering the man who fed the entire village each week? Especially when the food was so good and strangely addictive. One evening, old Mama Ngozi, the village herbalist, came to Okonkwo's compound uninvited. She had known his daughter, Ijeoma, since birth, had even helped deliver her during a thunderstorm 15 years ago. "I have not seen the girl in moons," she said, staring at him with clouded eyes that saw more than most. "Bring her to me. I want to braid her hair before my hands turn to dust." Okonkwo's jaw tightened. "She's with her mother's people," he replied. "In Umuahia." Mama Ngozi chuckled dryly. "You forget, Okonkwo, I was her mother's people." That night, the drums didn't beat. The sky hung heavy with silence, and even the crickets dared not sing. Okonkwo sat alone by the hearth, staring into the fire as it spat and cracked. The pot beside him boiled with something thick and dark. Not yam porridge. Not egusi soup. Just then, a small handprint began to form in the soot on the wall behind him. Tiny. Fragile. Familiar. He did not turn around. He only whispered, "Go back." But the handprint remained. A second one appeared. Then a third. Slowly, they dragged downward as if someone, was sliding down the wall from the inside. Okonkwo clenched his jaw. "I said go back," he barked, louder this time. The flames in the hearth hissed violently, flaring up with a sudden gust of wind that wasn't there before. And then, a faint giggle. Childlike. Cold. It was the same laugh his daughter used to make when she'd hide behind the plantain trees. His heart thundered. He rose to his feet, fist clenched, eyes scanning every corner of the room. "This is not real," he whispered, as if saying it aloud would banish the horror. But the air was thick with something ancient, older than guilt, older than grief. It pressed against his chest, heavy and accusing. Suddenly, the clay pot near the door shattered on its own, spilling its contents, water, herbs, and a single bone, across the floor. Okonkwo stepped back, trembling now. That pot had been his wife's. She had kept it there to ward off evil. The wind outside howled louder, almost like a voice wailing in mourning. Okonkwo's breath grew ragged. He backed away from the shattered pot, only to stumble into something soft behind him. He turned sharply, and there it was again. The girl. She stood there barefoot, her white dress soaked with something dark. Her eyes were hollow, and from her lips came no sound, only silence more deafening than a scream. Okonkwo's voice cracked. You are not real." But she raised her hand and pointed towards the cooking hut. Okonkwo turned toward the cooking hut, heart pounding like a war drum. The girl was gone. Just like that. No footsteps. No whisper. Nothing. He gripped his machete, its one handle sleek in his trembling hand. He approached the hut slowly, every step crunching dried leaves beneath his feet. The air grew thicker, heavier, as though the earth itself disapproved of his next move. He pushed open the door. Smoke curled lazily from the dying embers. But it wasn't the fire that stopped him cold. It was the iron pot sitting atop the stones. The same pot that shattered minutes ago. Whole again. Full again. And this time, it was boiling. Okonkwo stepped closer, squinting through the smoke. The scent was unbearable, richer and more intoxicating than any stew he'd ever made. But it was wrong. Sickeningly wrong. The contents of the pot churned and bubbled, releasing puffs of steam that seemed to whisper. He leaned in, only for a single bone to rise to the surface, a small one. Too small for a goat. Too thin for chicken. His hands trembled. His knees buckled. That was no animal bone. He staggered back, bile rising in his throat, the whisper of the spirits growing louder, as if they had waited for him to know. He had fed them. And now, they were feeding him back. Okonkwo stumbled out of the hut, gasping for breath. The night air slapped him awake, but the smell clung to his skin, buried deep in his nose, refusing to let go. He looked at the villagers, laughing, talking, licking their fingers with delight. They had eaten. They were satisfied. His daughter's anklet was no longer on her foot. It now dangled from the thatch above the fire like a charm. He hadn't noticed it before. He fell to his knees, tears pouring down his face. "What have I done?" he whispered. But the ancestors were silent. The gods, too. Only the moon looked on, round and pitiless. The morning came too bright, too warm, as if the land itself mocked his torment. Okonkwo sat alone, arms wrapped around his knees, staring blankly at the spot where the fire had burned low. The pot was empty. Licked clean. A young boy from the village skipped by, smiling. "Papa Okonkwo, that meat yesterday, it was the sweetest I've ever tasted. Will you cook again for the festival next moon?" Okonkwo didn't answer. He couldn't. His lips were dry, cracked. His heart, hollow. The boy ran off, laughing, unaware of the horror he had praised. Okonkwo turned to the earth and vomited. Later that day, as the sun hung heavy over the village, Okonkwo was summoned to the elder's hut. He walked slowly, each step weighed down not by age, but by guilt. The elders sat in a circle, faces stern. They had questions. Okonkwo, the oldest among them, began, "Your feast united the village. But where did such rich meat come from? We know every hunter's kill. Yours was different." Okonkwo's throat tightened. He forced a lie through cracked lips. "It was a gift, from a traveler. A rare kind of goat." The elders exchanged glances. Suspicion lingered, but no one pressed further. "Not yet,"